And to do that, I think I'm gonna walk you through the journey that I made like with this product strategy. So we go through how it all started for me, how we actually identified the need of a product strategy, because we did have a company strategy, but we did not have a product strategy, and how we did that and what we actually learned. So that's the whole thing that we're gonna go through in the next 15 minutes or so. So buckle up because we're gonna start. And all started for me in, that's pretty much me, when I got the question if I wanted to be the CPO of Hemnet. It was like, as I said, the first time I worked as a CPO, I took over product development organization of around 70 people, where basically the company has changed owners, and they were kind of like changing in the midst of changing direction. And the biggest problem when I started at Hemnet with product development was that it was not really, execution was not really there. You know, like when you have that never-ending conversation with stakeholders, like why things are not getting out, and why are we developing this and not that? Why are people not, now I'm gonna say the thing that I always hate when I hear, why are we not working fast enough? Why are we not going like fast enough? And I was like, okay, wait. And that was my first thing. And I mean, that's not the talk today, but I mean, the answer was, yeah, we did not have a clear prioritization. So that's what I worked a lot with in the first part of my CPO role. And I did that for around 12 months. And then I was kind of lucky because we didn't have a product strategy, but we did have a company strategy. So I did not have to reinvent the wheel. We had a direction. And that's what we worked with, basically aligning priorities, direction, delivering, which we actually did. And I did that for around, yeah, a year or so. When we were in November 2020, so more or less there, we had then to go into the new budget and company strategy process, and we had to start with the new 3-year strategy. So that's when basically I started to think, okay, but how should we do it? And when I started to think about it, I also realized that since when I had taken over the product organization, there were clear signs that we were actually, even though we had a strategy, a company strategy, we were lacking product direction. And the signs of this were, if you think about it in retrospect, really clear. They were not extremely clear while in the midst of it, but the signs were that even though we had a company strategy that did not change for 3 years, which is also pretty rare, it did not change, it was the same. The perception from product teams was that we were changing focus every quarter. So every time we went into OKR planning, it was like we were reinventing the wheel every time. We also did not really have a clearly prioritized customer behavior that we wanted to work towards. It was more like commercial goals that were our strategy, which also led to that we had many times an inside-out perspective, meaning that what we were saying is more like what we as Hemnet wanted and never what actually was in for the customer, or what do we want the customer to do? What should the customer do for us to get what we want? And I mean, these signs were pretty clear. I mean, here are kind of like copy-paste posted of our quarterly retrospective, where basically there were signs of teams lacking long-term vision, long-term direction, having hard time basically every quarter go back and start from the start. So when I was there, realizing all those signals and needed to start with a new strategy, then I realized that what we needed was a product strategy. So not just a company strategy, but a product strategy that will be, of course, cascading from the company strategy. And what do I mean with product strategy? The product strategy for us at Hemnet and for me, it's the formulation of a business goal from a customer perspective. So basically, it describes the behavior that the customer we want the customer to have in order to drive company goals. So let me give you an example, so it's going to be clearer what I mean. This one is a pretty standard, right, company strategy. financial goal, increase revenue with 20% by end of the year. I mean, 20% growth, whatever you name it. I mean, that's basically what we also had. Create a new product line that will generate 20% year-on-year growth. Yet, doesn't tell you exactly how. So the product strategy for us is like every third customer recommends our product to a friend. So you see, it's like a behavior that we have a customer that buys our product and recommend. And this is what we believe, that's what we want to bet to drive this 20% growth. We could have done it in many other ways, like, I don't know, expanding a new market or whatever. But this is like the product strategy, taking the goal, translating it to a customer behavior. And when creating this strategy, so I knew what I needed to do, but I also needed to define how I wanted to get it done. So I put down some principles, which turned out to work good for us. The first one is the time frame. And I think that the product strategy needs to be long-term. For us, long-term is 3 years. We have a 3-year strategy that we basically review every year. But why is 3 year good for us? Because this kind of behavior is not something that you change overnight. And many times, you know, it's a new behavior that you want to introduce, and it's gonna take time. If you're working a startup where you kind of have a time frame of 6 months, I would not, for example, recommend of creating this kind of product strategy, because your focus should be much more on execution, and maybe when you have market fit, get on the product strategy. But for us, we had the luxury of having this long-term, and that's the thing, long-term in 3 years, what do we want to do? The second part is that customer-centric. And I mean, this should be obvious for everyone working with product development. You need to solve a real customer problem. Yet, if you test this, we are all really used of talking about from a company perspective. So formulating this, what does this mean 20% growth from a customer perspective, was actually really hard in the beginning. We had to go like different rounds, but that was really an important success factor. Third part, it's that it's a mean to execution to me. I mean, you always have to go back to that product strategy and be able to use it to back up your decision. So when you have to prioritize, you always can go back and say, oh, will this help us making those customer recommend? Yes or no? If it's a no, yeah, then trash it, because it's not in line with the product strategy. So that's also connected with it needs to be easy to understand. I mean, it needs to be something that everyone can understand and remember, because otherwise you're not going to use it and you're going to fail with it. And last but not least, and this we're still struggling, it gives direction. It's not the law. I mean, it's not that it's based on our best knowledge right now. It might change if we have new learnings. But so it's like, it's not the Bible, it's not the law, it's something that you give as a direction and you go back and revisit. So with this, basically, I knew what I needed to do. I put the principle of my product strategy, and then I started to think, how do I do this? I mean, I still had like 80 people there. It was not like when I worked with startup, I had worked with product strategies, but it's much easier if you have like handful of people that you have to get on board. I mean, 3-4 people, you can always have one-on-one, you can talk with them. It's not an issue, but 80 people becomes a little bit difficult. So I started to think for myself, what do I have to contribute to? And what do I want the organization to contribute to? Because I always had in the shoes, you know, and probably many of you had as well, that someone handed me a PowerPoint with a strategy and they were like, yeah, do it. I mean, that's not really interesting in a way, you know, it's like you don't get that buy-in that you need to actually work on it. So I figured that there were 2 very different, you know, roles in this product strategy. On one side, there was me. And my role, I see like defining those customer behaviors, like of all the different business opportunities, of all the different things we could drive, which one are the most important and which one shall we actually not focus on? This is really important. And I mean, the example I did is pretty easy to say, this or that. But I mean, focus is really saying no to good opportunities. So it's like backing up every time someone trying to derail. It's really my role in the product strategy. And also in all this rollout, I thought it was really important to be extremely clear about what I wanted to get feedback on. You know, it was not like everyone should get to question everything, because then you don't get something really productive. It's more about, for me, it was more about getting the feedback on the wording. Might feel silly, but many times one gets stuck in a word. Don't be, even you worked a bit with it and you think it's the perfect word, don't get stuck. It's important that clarity comes before ego of anyone that work with that. Another thing was KPIs and goals. How do we measure a behavior? That also was not an easy task. And that's something that also in retrospect, we did not nail from the beginning. So any input there, but also daring to put something instead of putting nothing. And also like be really flexible about iterating. So that's basically where my rule of thumb to create this strategy that was owned by me, but also lived and breathed by the product organization. So when I had that in place, I also understood that to actually make sure that people were willing to work with this strategy, I needed to involve them in the strategy. Like, you know, not handing this PowerPoint and then say, oh, go ahead and deliver on it. I needed to create engagement. I needed to create interest. I needed to create motivation. And all of this happened in the midst of COVID. So I did not have the chance of talking with a single soul of anyone, you know, and what could I've done? Before COVID, I've like, okay, at least I would have gathered everyone in a room and I would have at least got a sense of, okay, are they following? Are they sleeping? Are those parts like more interesting? Is anyone raising a hand? I did not have any of this. And still I needed to create, you know, this one, I needed to share the material. Two, I needed to make sure that people would read the material and be interested, ask questions. And three, of course, I needed to apply this feedback. Otherwise, just feedback with no feedback loop would be nothing. And that's what I did. I kind of re-engineered the process and adjusted it for physical distance. I did it for COVID, but I think it's really important now. Anytime you cannot get everyone in the room, this is a really good way. So now you're going to see a slide with like a little bit of innovation of product strategy rollout. So what I did is, instead of what I have done would have been a lot of meetings. Instead, what I did, I had like a first draft. I have the first meeting, of course, to get input. But then all the green boxes there are steps that I did mixing sync and async communication. So the very key here is that first I recorded short videos, and our strategy is based on customer behavior. We have 4 main customer group. So I had like in total 5 video, 15 minutes each, because no one's had time to see me talking 2 hours. I'm not a movie star. So it's like you could watch the intro video and you could watch your team customer. So basically you would invest 30 minutes and you will get like your team's part of your product strategy. This could be watched basically whenever, because they were saved in Drive. And they, of course, I prepared a questionnaire to ask async question, both in Slack. So if anyone wanted to ask a question like directly, they could. There were also an anonymous way to do that, in case, you know, you wanted to say, oh, this is really stuck, friend. This is like, what are you talking about? And maybe you didn't want to tell to my face that you could do that as well. And then we wrap it up also with a sync Q&A. And that was actually in 2020 one of the best highlight of my year, because I had like 90%, it was a non-mandatory meeting. 90% of the product organization at Hemnet showed up and was actually there and asked question. And to me, that was really a sign that I had that engagement. So this like dance of sync and async was really good for us, and actually taught me that these ways of working that we're still using, not only for a product strategy rollout, but even when we do, for example, we prepare for a big workshop, we use the sync and async, because I see that there are a lot of pros with this. First, it's really inclusive. If you think about it, when we do meeting, we always cater first for the people that are best at taking in direct information, like one-on-one. While in this, you could watch, you could read, and you could like be in a meeting, not be in a meeting. There were different ways, like kind of taking in the messaging. It was also really scalable, because still at this point today, 1.5 years later, I can share those videos. So I don't know how many hours I saved of like going through the product strategy. I send the video, and then of course we can have in-depth meeting about that. But that's an all other story, that if I just have to be there and repeat the same things because I have new colleagues, for example. It's also enabled me to get multiple feedback loops, because people were consuming video, were looking at things, were asking questions, and helped me making the material better as we were going along. And last but not least, it was really important that it allowed for some time for reflection. You know, at least for me, I don't always have the best feedback as soon as someone tells me something. You know, that one when someone comes up my desk and say, oh, tell me something, give me the answer now. That's the worst thing, because I'm not good at this. There are people that are awesome at this, I'm not. So this method actually allowed for different people needs to get in place. So this is what we did, but what were actually our learnings? When now it's 1.5 years later, since we have this product strategy, how does this help us, or has it helped us? Spoiler alert, yes, it had. You probably already got that. So since we implemented the product strategy, for the first, I mean, I should say that we had great execution, and we hit all our company financial goals. Why? Because, I mean, we first streamline decision, right? If you make clear the long-term focus, if you also make clear what is the behavior you can drive, then you really create magic of those amazing product developers that can go and talk to customers and understand what they can actually do to solve a problem. This was really, especially the formulation of the product strategy from a customer perspective, was really a game changer for us, because you cannot answer the question, how do a buyer recommend, without talking to a buyer, right? So that meant that from that point when we implemented the product strategy, we were actually almost by magic, we started to have bi-weekly customer interviews to actually feed that strategy. And I mean, that was not the case before. So those are like really the main gain that we had. And all of this together, of course, with a lot of practice. I mean, do not expect that day one all this happens. It takes a little while. But in the long run, it made us really streamline execution and deliver on company goals. And this is really, well, work for us, like in the day-to-day life. We started to work and to talk with customers. And by today, almost, or I want to say all our product team work with the opportunity solution tree. You probably know the framework by Teresa Torres. And when you map all the opportunities, it's much easier to choose between them, because you can map them to a customer behavior. And when you map them to a customer behavior, then it's like, one, it makes it easier to already focus on one side, and two, it makes it easier to also focus your interviews on getting data about it. And really streamlining decision was the biggest gain, if you ask me. I have basically no questions around which behavior we have questions that are more in detail, but that's normal. But there's no doubt about the direction. And the other super big gain, it's the customer centricity, that it comes almost for free. It comes almost for free if you make that effort of formulating from a company customer perspective and not a company perspective. But I mean, it was not a walk in the park, and it's still not a walk in the park, and we're still not done. So this could still be better for us. This all strategy and rollout, it's, you know, that I talked about engagement and feel engaged, and so it's still a little bit of a struggle for newcomers. So if you were part of this rollout, if you gave feedback, if you were into it, then, I mean, those, of course, are my evangelists of the strategy. But I mean, as a newcomer, it's not as easy to come in this. And as we are growing and we have new colleagues basically every week, that's a little bit of a weak side, which also connects with the other weak side of this, that having those scalable video and presentation, they are scalable to a point, because of course, as you go along, you learn, and as you learn, you want to tweak. And then, of course, the video that are recorded, they are not 100% correct. So sometimes you can get a glitch between, oh, but that wasn't the video. Yeah, but the video was like 1.5 years old. So maybe, I don't know, I have to consider if maybe in a year or so I have to do other videos. Still, I think they're really worthwhile because they save me a bunch of time. So takeaways. What do I want you to go to walk away with today? I think from my opinion and my experience, product strategy is really the single most important thing you can do to align your product organization. And jump into the third point, if I don't think you have to, I mean, if you have a CPO that is willing for it or a head of product of your area, that's great. I think you can also do it for your product. I mean, you don't have to do it all the way up to the company strategy if your company is not there. I think it's something you can really do as a PM tomorrow if you want to. If you have something, if you have a draft, that's something you can discuss with your boss, and then take as a way to actually align priorities and streamline them. And when you do that, I think it's really important that you have to be really flexible in all this. For all this to work, you need buy-in. To be buy-in, you need to invite your team or whoever you work with to the strategy. Otherwise, it's gonna just be a slide. And that's I've never seen working, actually. I've been a lot of strategy, and the slide strategy I've never seen working because they were only in the head of the one writing the slide. So yeah, my wish and hope is that you got some takeaways and something really concrete that you could use. And you might consider, if you don't have a product strategy in place, to think about it, if nothing else, for your product. And thank you so much for having me here. I did some test here. I mean, that's QR code is from LinkedIn. I never tried before. I don't know if it works, but that should give should send you to my LinkedIn page, where of course we can connect. And I also have a blog if you're interested. I always try to write about really concrete tips on what we work on. But thank you so much.
Thanks, Francesca. Thanks for this talk. And actually, we do have 2 questions in the chat. Yeah, so the first one is, how did you come up with this specific product strategy? Well, actually, guys, you can unmute yourself. We didn't have so many people. You can unmute and voice the question.
I can also stop sharing so I see you better. Yes.
Yep. So yeah, how did you come up with this specific product strategy? And I believe Sergey means the reason based on why you have picked this metric, exactly this one you talked about.
Yes, exactly this one. I mean, this one refers to a specific product line, but I mean, how I started with the product strategy, it always starts with company strategy and financial goals. So that sets a little bit the ambition, right? I mean, one thing is like for us, we have this ambition of, we have two financial goals, which I can talk about because they're public. So it's like we have 20% growth year on year. Generally for the company, and we have also basically EBITDA. So how do you say that in English? Basically, like income minus cost needs to be at least 50%. So we want to be profitability at least 50%. So it's like growing profitably, and we are a public company, so those goals are like we are valued by the market on those goals. So those goals.
But how did you transition to this? Like the
yeah, exactly.
The customers would recommend. Maybe you had some options, and you decided
exactly.
Okay, this option actually reflects this strategy point from the.
Yeah, you start from the goal, and then from the goal we already have. I mean, it's rare that you start from a blank sheet. So we had in this case is like our customers. We knew that we had a new product line that was working really well. So we needed to find a way to actually power our growth. And we saw that the best way was through retention. And retention in this case was based on recommendations. And I mean, of course, how do you choose that? The first thing is that you take the goal, you find different options. I mean, that's the first thing, mapping the options. And then some options will disappear because they're not ambitious enough, or the market is not big enough, or the competitor is too strong, or whatever you might have. And then you kind of go deeper on the 3 or 4 that you have, and you kind of, okay, try to put a little bit more of understanding which one is the best one. And that's the one that
you are testing. This is again like a hypothesis, and you are testing it with the user experience. Like
correct.
If it brings you that kind of closer to your business goal.
Yeah,
I understand. And one more question: what are the main elements of the product strategy? I believe Maria was looking for maybe some tips. What are the components of this strategy, or this is just pure words? Like wording, or maybe something else.
Yeah, I mean, what I have, like, if you think only about the structure, the first thing is like connection with company strategy. So first is like goals, connecting with company strategy. Then I have the strategies broken down by target group or customer group. For us, because you come to Hemnet to buy and sell. So we have, for example, buyer, seller, agents, brokers. So and every single one of those has then outcome, or like that behavior that you want to drive, and we also have success metrics on how do we actually measure that we are going towards that behavior.
Thanks, guys. Any questions from the offline group? Hey, sleepy ones. No questions from the offline. I had actually one question I was thinking about, like when you started to make the interviews, right, every 2 weeks, and then let's say from the interview you see some input, and then you decide, which actually changes your product strategy. Did you happen to change the company strategy? I mean, if this is the one way from company strategy to product strategy, or this is kind of iterative and loop.
Yeah, I understand what you mean.
Back to company strategy, yeah.
Yeah, both are connected, of course. And I mean, it has not happened to us that we had to change company or product strategy based on insight. But what has happened is that we are still a little bit better defining what is the behavior. So, you know, maybe we start with all the buyers come to Hemnet for all of their needs, even when not only when they're buying, but even when they are researching the market, for example. That is something that we started with. And then as we work with like more research phases, like we develop new features and new things, then we realize that maybe to make that happen, what we actually have to focus on is more account creation and more stickiness and loyalty. So that is basically like an evolution. Now we're working on an evolution of that behavior. But we have not found anything that would completely change the product or the company strategy. We're more like evolving. But if that would have had happened, then of course we would have changed both.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was actually my question, if it's kind of recommendation to change or how to behave. And do you how do you involve the senior leadership, I mean CEO, CFO in the process? They kind of acknowledge the product strategy in the end or approve, or just out of curiosity question?
I mean, I am in the leadership meeting, so I mean that's my product strategy is my responsibility.
Yeah, but I mean,
so I mean I am the one approving if anyone has an approval. But I mean, of course, as in any company, it's the board that approves the company strategy. And then because our product strategy cascades from that, there's no formal approval in that sense. But of course, I mean, it's a really important part to keep all the stakeholders involved. And especially when you start and you have behavior, that's not always the easiest thing for all the stakeholders to understand. So you might have to adapt a little bit how you talk about it in the beginning, focusing more on getting them on board than being stuck on exactly the same formulation.
Yeah, I understand. And typically when you have this kind of newcomer to come, or who should be aware of the product strategy, regular developers or just the product people? Or because you talked about how to involve the newcomers, who are them? Were you talking about product people versus just regular team member, the developer?
I mean, at Hemnet, everyone that works in a product team is aware of the product strategy.
Okay.
Of course, the one and everyone was like involved in this process. Of course, the bearer of the product strategy should be the PM. So that's basically the main point. And I mean, a part of the responsibility of keeping the product strategy alive for newcomers is also the PM on board their new team members with the product strategy. So answer to the question is everyone working with product development.
Yeah, thank you. Guys, questions? Unmute yourself, ask questions.
What are other approach for market research except the interviews that are you using the most probably?
So I couldn't get like, what are we using
Market
the most?
Techniques you're using.
What market research techniques you're using except the customer interviews?
Depends on what kinds of interviews. I mean, we in this we do. How do you say? We do.
Really do.
We really do. We do explorative interviews, for example, when we want to test different kinds of, how do you, for example, search for a property? I mean, it's like, okay, then we bring someone in and ask them to search. That's one thing. Some other times we do prototypes. Then we want to do like feature testing. Some other times when it's B2B, because we also have a component of B2B in our business, that is more like a customer one-on-one meeting. They're a little bit more, how do you say, old school, maybe, if you want to put it like that. So it depends a little bit on what we want to test. And the beauty of it is that it varies. So this every other week is like every team does it every other week. So actually you can do it every other week times 9. That's the time that we talk with customers. And that's not always possible in, when you have B2B customers and you have 10 customers. I mean, you cannot talk to them you cannot bother them all the time, but you can, we find other ways depending on what we need to research.
Cool. Nice. So yeah, just final notes, comments from someone online or offline. We are actually happy to see some of you, as Francesca said, live. I mean, the faces, the kind of curious eyes, emotions, the hats, probably, you know, it's always nice to see. The noise, the real life.
Yeah. I just came back because I'm outside with my kid. And it's my kid, so don't worry about it. May I ask you a bit of questions, a very small one, about the perspective of, you mentioned that you do a lot of talking with the customers, and may I just refer a bit from the UX design perspective? How often do you expose them to your strategy, to the strategy of the company, and just involvement their work, because it's just user experience and just the general experience of the have the user use of the product to the clients, and if it makes sense.
Yeah, it does. I have always this thing that I talk we. I realized who's we? We is everyone in the product team. So to me, those interviews, basically they are led by our UXers. So it's our UXer that lead the interviews with the customers. And then this one beautiful thing with COVID is one dare to say there was something beautiful with COVID, that everyone gets so used online. So now it's really easy to have those interviews online, and you can have a bunch of people that sit and listen, and they don't have the camera, so it's not overwhelming. You couldn't have 10 people in an interview in a physical room, because poor person being interviewed. But what we do is that UXers lead the interview, and to make it as streamlined as possible, maybe we have 2 or 3 of them for different teams that have each of them as a different theme. So the person gets briefed, and they say, okay, now come Johan, and he's gonna ask you about this. And now comes Maria, and she's gonna talk about this. And then, many times PMs are listening in. What we also do, which I love, is that we record this, so anyone can go back and actually listen from the customer. So you don't have to read a transcript or whatever. You can actually take it, and that's super valuable. But to answer to your question, it's UXers leading the all customer interviews, and they're also really, really involved in the formulation of the customer behavior.
It's very cool. Thank you. Very cool approach. Thank you.
If you're not do it, try it.
No. I'm doing it as well. It's just in different manners. So because it's just on the project that I work with, I have a dedicated research team that's for just specific to the research. But I'm working just on the financial. It's just a bit different way, but anyway, it's just a bit different project. So it's a bit different specific. But yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for sharing, Ihor. Thank you, everyone who was with us. Francesca, for you is the biggest thank and hugs from Ukraine. And this is Product Management Community Center. We will do our next events. Please follow us on social media. Guys, Tanya.
See you.
Thank you. Have fun in the room.
For the speech. Have a good day, guys, and the weekend. Bye.
Bye.
Offline. Thank you. The one's great. Enjoy.
Bye.
Francesca, thank you one more time. Thanks.
Thank you. Bye.
See you.